Something strange is going on in Leighton. Two strangely connected major stations. The seemingly pointless Leighton West, the mysterious Winstree, the absurdity of Upper Staplow, and many other oddities besides. Well, today, I am going to make sense of all of them. Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. Recently, I uploaded the first episode of this series, SCR Has Lore, in which I delve deep into the past of SCR and piece together various clues about it. It's doing decently, and you all seem to really like it. So today, we're back doing it again, but this time with the Leighton area. Before we start though, I wanted to mention that these videos take hours to make. In fact, I spent 12 hours just writing this video script. So I'm going to remind you that if you watch my videos frequently, you should subscribe, as it proves to me that there are people out there who want more high-effort content like this video. By the way, you should really watch episode 1 if you want to fully understand this. But first, a quick recap of episode 1. Nothing makes sense over here, so therefore there were two companies. One who wanted to build lines all across the county, and another who wanted to run trains from Stepford to Leighton and further, that hated each other, which resulted in everything on this map. Also, I didn't mention this last time, but I know the motive of the Green Company, because there's next to no evidence that they served the centre of Benton or anywhere else not directly on the way from Stepford to Leighton, with the exception of Port Benton, an area which was less than a mile off of their line. Anyways, there may have been many anomalies here, but there are also some over here too. For example, Leighton Stepford Road and Leighton City are both major terminus stations, but they're actually on the same line and are linked by a 90-degree curve sunk into a cutting. This means that at some point, they were each the Leighton terminus of either the Red or Green Company. In this episode and most future ones, we'll be tracking what we figured out with a map just like the one shown in the recap, and update it every time we figure something out. Since we don't yet know which company served each terminus or where the lines went before arriving in Leighton, the map for this episode will just look like this for now. With that sorted, let's move on to the rest of the video. We can't actually figure out which company served each terminus at all for now, but we can answer these three questions. Where is Winstree? Where do these lines to Leighton call at? And what's the history of Leighton West? Let's answer these in order. We'll start by running through what Winstree is. Winstree is a mysterious station that was added in November 2017. It was removed in the peak update 5 months later, and the line that served it went to Leighton Stepford Road instead. The reason why this is the case, not that Winstree was replaced by Leighton, is because on the Legacy expansion map, the map which SCR's original team drew up way back at the start of the game, planned for the future of the game, Winstree is on it as an intermediate major station, but Leighton exists as a separate station on the same line, which would have gone to Lynn. This means that, based on the rules of canon in SCR that I established last episode, Winstree isn't the same as Leighton. Now moving on to where it could be located. While it's not possible to narrow it down to an exact location, we can get pretty close. Winstree would have either been an intermediate stop on one of the original lines to Leighton, or would have been a terminus on its own branch. Between these two possibilities, we can narrow it down to one. Winstree can't be a terminus on its own branch for a few reasons. It can't be the case because if it was then, firstly, why isn't the branch there today? Secondly, how would the Legacy line to Lynn have continued past Leighton, while both serving it well and without costing way too much? And thirdly, despite that making for a good in-universe explanation for Winstree not existing anymore, the alternative potential Winstree locations have a way better one. That being that either Winstree is the same as Rocket Parade, and that it just got renamed. Space rockets weren't invented until the 1920s after all. Or that Winstree was an intermediate stop on the old line to Leighton City that SCR was planning on using as part of their line to Lynn, but couldn't due to issues. It's also possible that both lines could have had a station called Winstree, similarly to how there are two railway lines in London, each with a station called Bethnal Green. For now, we'll update the map with both potential Winstree sites, but label them as such rather than confirmed stations. Now to answer the next question. The next question for us to answer here is where the lines corded on their way to Leighton. I believe that before getting to their respective termini at Leighton, the two lines would have called at separate stations at Upper Staplow, and then both called at the same station at Water Newton before continuing on their own separate routes again, passing the aforementioned potential Winstree sites. Why do I think this? Well, let's start with the first point. Today, Upper Staplow has two stations. One is the currently open Upper Staplow Connect station, which serves trains to several major cities, and the other is a disused station which the SCR community calls Old Upper Staplow. It's located along the express tracks that pass the village. Since Upper Staplow is such a small village, what could this mean? That's right, competition. However, similarly to the Leighton termini, we don't know which company served each one due to a lack of potential evidence. And yes, even though Old Upper Staplow has red signage, we can't confirm that the red company used it for two reasons which are on screen now. Pause if you want to read them. Something I should mention here though, as it's not major enough to get its own part, is that Hampton Hargate Station, one stop north of Upper Staplow Connect Station, has a name that is likely historic and implies that there was a second station there, which is more evidence for these companies going to Leighton. However, we unfortunately have literally nothing to go off of as to where that second station is, let alone who served it. Let's now move on to what I said about Water Newton. I think that Water Newton was an interchange serving both companies' lines for three main reasons. Reason 1. While we have found pairs of alignments both north and south of Water Newton station, we haven't found any that skip it in any way, leading me to believe that both lines went through the same place in Water Newton. Reason 2. It would make sense to have an interchange there. Some people might have not been able to get direct trains between where they lived and their destinations, so having an interchange near Leighton, a major city, would definitely fix that problem. This turns out to be another piece of evidence backing my Ellesmere explanation from last episode as well, with that station being the same thing but for Stepford City. And finally, reason 3. The name of the station, and by extension the town it serves, Water Newton, implies that there is wetland, marshland, and or large bodies of water in the area, making it hard to build rail through there. Maybe what happened is that both companies had to build their lines through the same place and decided to just build an interchange there due to the benefits for their passengers that it would bring. Now to update the map. Once again, we don't know which operators served which lines, so even though we can add Water Newton and the lines past Upper Staplow to the map, this part of it is still entirely grey. Also, we can't add Hampton Hargate to it at all as we don't know enough about it to do that, and we can't connect this map to the one from last episode yet, since we currently know next to nothing about Morganstown or Hampton, which would be essential for linking the two maps together. With that done, let's move on to Leighton West. Leighton West is one of SCR's most confusing stations. It's located between Leighton City and Edgemead on its own single track branch with passing loops. It clearly isn't completely new, however, as indicated by the abandoned platform that's been there since 1.8, which is when SCR added the station. It doesn't make a lot of sense, however. It's very close to Leighton City, which calls into question its existence. However, this is an almost exact parallel to the Port Binton Morganstown dock scenario from last episode, which probably means that Leighton City and Leighton West weren't on the same line originally. Also, this is technically the inverse of the Port Binton scenario, because I believe that Leighton West likely was originally a through station on a line going to Lynn. Why though? Well, for three main reasons. The first reason is that the alignment between Leighton Stepford Road and the Leighton West Triangle probably didn't exist originally. This is because, as mentioned at the start, the track around the modern-day Leighton City runs through an out-of-place feeling cutting straight through the centre of Leighton. And guess where this cutting ends? That's right, it ends immediately before the Leighton West Triangle. The second reason is the need of such a station. Being a city as large as it is, Lynn would have had to have been served by rail back then. And although it's not possible to figure out which company served Leighton West and by extension the rest of the line, there does still seem to be a clear purpose to Leighton West's existence back then, since both companies' major Leighton stations would have been terminating only, seeing as how trains going past Leighton West couldn't have ran past Leighton Stepford Road or Leighton City without turning around. the trains that served Lynn would have had to have either reversed at their terminus station, which wouldn't have been ideal due to congestion and the need for extra fuel, or would have had to skip it, which would have required a through station in Leighton to allow these trains to still serve it. And that's exactly where Leighton West would come in. It would have been that through station, allowing trains going to Lynn to call at Leighton while maintaining efficiency. And finally, the third reason is that it almost certainly has to be a through station based on the things I said as part of reason 2. Now to add Leighton West to the map. As infuriating as it may seem, we won't be able to do much with Leighton West here. All we know of right now is that it was probably a through station, as not only do we not know which line Leighton West links up to and where, but we also don't know which company served it. This is because while the Green Company literally has the appropriate motive to serve it, so does the Red Company. In fact, I only mentioned the and further afield bit of the Green Company's motive due to me not considering that the Red Company could also build a line to Lynn. Not to mention that there's also some unlikely possibilities such as Leighton West being the terminus of a third company that ran from Lynn, Leighton West being used by both companies so that one could get access to Rayleigh Bay and the other Lynn, and Leighton West still being a terminus but from the east rather than the south. So, since we can't be certain, we actually won't add Leighton West to the map. That's all for today. Now to end with some final thoughts. Well, that episode was something. And while there were more questions gained than answers, we did answer some things today. I probably won't do a part 2 for this episode for now, because there are way too many loose ends with Leighton and nowhere near enough things to look at to try and tie them up. Instead, I'll probably be doing either Stepford's location within the UK, along with some related mini theories next, or the line of trees and the Whitefield line. Also, thanks to everyone who watched to the end. I appreciate you all and hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Anyways, roll credits.